Welcome to Meet, Act, and Part, a Masonic podcast hosted by Midnight Freemasons, Greg Knott, Darin, Todd Vriesen, and Bill Hostler.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part. This is episode 35, entitled Justice. This is the final of a four-part series that Darin and I have done on the four cardinal virtues. And I've learned a lot as we've talked about these. We hear them in the lectures, but these are four areas that you can listen to in our three previous episodes and then this one on justice that really give you some, I think, foundational tips as to how to live your life, not only as a Mason, but as a person in general. So let me again introduce myself. My name is Greg Knott. I'm one of the co-hosts of Meet, Act, and Part, and again, we'll be talking about justice tonight.
And hi, my name is Darin Laters.
And Darin, I think this is a very timely topic about justice. We hear it constantly now with what's went on in society with some of the trials and things, which I won't get into those, but you hear that word justice over and over and over. And I actually wrote an article about it. I had, believe it or not, forgot all about it till I was doing some research in 2013 on the Midnight Freemasons blog. I wrote about justice, and I just want to read you some of what I was writing then, and maybe, again, what we're thinking about it here in 2021. So this is 8 years ago, and it says, "The entered apprentice learns in the first degree lecture about the four cardinal virtues, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice." And I said some brethren and I had recently been having a discussion about the topic of justice, so I wanted to explore what it meant in a Masonic sense. In Duncan's Masonic ritual, the EA lecture states, "Justice is that standard or boundary of right which enables us to render to every man without distinction his just due. This virtue is not only consistent with divine and human laws, but is the very cement and support of civil society. And as justice in a great measure constitutes the real good men, so it should be the invariable practice of every Mason never to deviate from the minutest principles thereof. The charge you receive while standing in the northeast corner of the lodge, your feet forming the right angle of a square, was an allusion to the pedal." So what does this mean in the Masonic Lodge? Well, our ritual frequently uses the phrases "in every well-governed lodge." And this makes reference to a set of principles of how lodges conduct their business, how the brethren interact with each other, and how problems that arise within the lodge are ultimately dealt with. A lodge is created with the granting of a charter from a Grand Lodge. The Grand Lodge has issued this charter based upon the rules of its own constitution and bylaws. This constitution and bylaws were created by a group of men, Masons, who agreed to utilize these common principles in the execution of the fraternity's business. Men become Masons through a process outlined within this constitution and bylaws via the ritual of our own fraternity. The ritual illustrates through an allegorical story the important principles and lessons that serve as the basis for Masonry. Justice thus forms the very basis of our organization. It guides how we conduct our business, how we deal with issues that face us, and provide the guidance in carrying out the actions necessary to keep peace and harmony within the institution. The obligations outline a code of conduct in how we strive to live and interact with our brethren. The charge in the philograph decree further explains to us, quote, "Our laws and regulations you are strenuously to support, and be always ready to assist in seeing them duly executed. You're not to palliate or aggravate the offenses of your brethren, but in the decision of every trespass against our rules, you are to judge with candor, admonish with friendship, and reprehend with justice." Again, that's part of the Duncan ritual. So we are thus taught not only the importance of our obligation, but also an approach to which justice should be carried out. So what does this mean within the local lodge? As brethren, we have an obligation, a responsibility, and a duty to help each other in seeing that our common goals, rules, and high standards are maintained. This can lead to some difficult choices at times, especially when, in the quote, in the decision of every trespass against our rules, you are to judge with candor, admonish with friendship, and reprehend with justice, unquote. So these tasks are not to be taken lightly, but are often necessary to maintain the harmony within the lodge and sustain our high moral standards and ultimately fulfill our obligations to each other. So I wrote that in 2013, and really I still feel it's completely applicable today. So when we think of justice in a Masonic sense, as I wrote that, I was trying to explain that, it was really the foundational operational piece of a lodge, of a Grand Lodge, of a Masonic body to know how we conduct our business. But it also, I think more importantly, says how we treat each other in terms if we need to correct one another with justice. And I think justice, of course, can have a wide variety of meanings depending on the individual that you're speaking with. But justice, as defined in my mind, says I need to do enough to right a wrong, but not too much to that individual that maybe is being corrected. So perhaps in one of the more simpler ways is if a brother has done something that perhaps he shouldn't have. Take your pick of scenarios, doesn't matter. One of the other parts of the ritual says we'll give wise counsel to that brother. And maybe that is simple enough as what the justice is. In other words, it says, with candor, you talk with that individual and say, maybe you shouldn't have done that. And maybe that brother looks and says, you're right. I shouldn't have done that. And to me, justice has then been served. And justice doesn't mean necessarily a punishment as we think of it in terms of the criminal justice system, but a justice is more of a bringing something that was perhaps wrong back to right, or in other words, correcting the course of action when you're off course, bringing you back to equilibrium and to the middle where you should be to govern yourself. So again, justice has a lot of meanings. There's a lot of books on Masonic justice. Mackey wrote them. They're volumes. But in the cardinal virtue sense, again, I think it's one of those foundational things as to how we operate with each other. And if something goes awry, it perhaps lays out a methodology or a set of guidelines or a set of consequences to help correct that erring brother. So, Darin, what's your reaction to justice?
So I want to talk about justice from the approach of kind of how justice as a virtue is represented. And all of the cardinal virtues basically are represented by women. And I know we didn't really get into that in our previous episodes, but I think just to lend to my point, justice is usually portrayed as a woman who is blindfolded holding scales. And reading from this article that I've quoted in the other episodes, the Freemasons Monthly Magazine from 1868, volume 27, it says, justice is one of the cardinal virtues of the Masonic Code. It is principle simply recognizing what is right and giving what is due. Its requirements demand an observance of the moral law. Equity is what she claims must be strictly established between contending parties. No revenge or cruelty can be instituted to satisfy the demands of justice. It must be the teachings of justice connected with the institution of Masonry. As the operative workman is required to carry his wall plumb and be careful to have each successive block of stone bear directly upon its predecessor, so the speculative craftsman should erect his moral temple. All acts must be upright, honest, and truthful. And in all his transactions with mankind, he is not only to deal justly with himself and his brethren, but with the world. If a Mason erects his moral edifice in harmony with this principle, it will not be ornamental, but durable and honorable. It is the cornerstone of the magnificent temple of Masonry. We have many in this world, but hope and pray that are not Masons, who seem to act as if justice consists in getting all they can and holding fast to everything obtained, that whatever will enrich themselves, if legally secured, is just. But Masonry does not teach this kind of justice. And then it ends with a quote, "It may be legal to sell intoxicating drink to a man and take his money, which should buy bread for a starving wife and children, but it would not be an act of the greatest, but it would be an act of the greatest injustice." And what I find interesting is that it's talking about balance, that you recognize what is right and you give what's due, that you not only expect to be treated justly, but you also treat others justly. And think about that symbol of those scales being in perfect balance when you think about the virtue of justice. And it's almost also fitting that justice is, in the older ritual, when they furnish a lodge with the cardinal virtues, justice is placed in the east. Well, the worshipful master sits in the east, and he is the authority of the lodge. He is the one that rules the lodge, and he has to treat all his members with justice. He has to be fair in his proceedings. He has to give everyone their due if they want to speak, and he has to allow everyone to air their voice. And I think that's fitting, that authority that the worshipful master uses from the east is the epitome of justice. It's the worshipful master that gavels the lodge up and down. He directs the proceedings. And once again, I think he needs to do that justly. Just one other point, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Greg. Something that I found interesting was another article I read. It says that in the southwest corner is justice, which is related to the pedal. Since a just man is one who, firmly planting his fleet on the principles of right, is as immovable as a rock and can be thrust from his upright position neither by the allurements of flatter nor the frowns of arbitrary power. And hence this word is suggested to the Mason certain symbolic instructions in relation to justice. Now in this case, they're putting justice in the southwest corner. As I said, the other ritual, which is Old English ritual, places it in the east. But I think that in any case, regardless of where justice is in the lodge, that it's an action that we need to use in all endeavors towards not only our brothers, but towards the profane world as well.
So Darin, a couple weeks back, as I record this, I went to Washington, D.C., and of course I've been there many times, and I always walk the mall and look at the national memorials and whatnot, but I went to see the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. I'd been there before, but it had been a while. And I just thought, it was, with, again, everything that was happening in society, I thought, let me go to there, because they inspire me. They send me a message every time I visit, regardless of how many times I've been there. But at the MLK Memorial, there are several quotes on that Dr. King said on a granite wall, but one of them says, this was 1965 when he was in Alabama. It says, "We must come to see that the end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience." And when I think of that in terms of the topic of justice, I think what it says is that we need to decide what's right, but in doing what we decide what's right, we must also live with that decision. In other words, there's justice, Darin, as you alluded to on the statue, that the lady is wearing the blindfold and says that justice is blind. But justice must also have that common understanding that you and I must look at something and say, yes, that's justice. But society is continually working on that definition, and it's an evolution over time as humankind seeks to get better within itself. And here it's been 50 years or more since Dr. King was speaking those words in the 1960s. And in 2021, they're just as applicable then as they are today. And so justice, again, in the perhaps in the Masonic sense, is going by a rule that is fair and not overburdened or not overblown or not overstated or not over implemented. That justice must be appropriately used with what needed to be corrected. And I think what you hear so much in today's society is saying that, look, the way we're operating in certain areas and certain things, we don't think is fair. We don't think that's justice. And so we're going to seek different justice to correct a wrong in our view. So justice is constantly being defined and redefined by mankind. But as Masons, you need to seek constantly to understand that meaning, how to apply it in a fair way, and in perhaps a Masonic Lodge context, do it in a way that helps build your brothers, and so that they learn from things that perhaps that didn't go right, but also you learn from them too. You know, justice is also supposed to be a means to illustrate to others that says, don't go out of due bounds, keep yourself within that bounds, and do what is right. And so, again, justice will probably always be a continual definition of change as to what is believed, but its core principles, I believe, are correcting one's actions without doing too much to one individual. So that's, again, justice is a big, big topic. I want to read a paragraph because I've read the other from Hillsborough Lodge 25. They have a nice article on the 4 cardinal virtues, and each one of them closes with a nice summary paragraph. It says, for Masons, justice is that standard or boundary of right, which enables us to render to every man his just due without distinction. Justice must always dictate fairness, honesty, morality, and neutrality in the treatment of all mankind, more especially a brother Mason. The exercise of this virtue incites us to act towards others in a manner that we would wish they would act towards us. So you hear a little bit of the golden rule there at the end. But again, think about what that's saying. Let me read those words again. Justice must always dictate fairness, honesty, morality, and neutrality in the treatment of all mankind. And so, if you think of those words again, not only as it alludes to here in the Masonic sense, but in the greater world, we can make a world that is more fair and just and kinder, and more rewarding for everyone. So again, justice of the 4 is one of my favorite topics because it really says how we treat one another and build our society. So, Darin, last thoughts, and then I'll wrap it up.
No, I think that's a very great summary of justice. I just want to get back to the one statement here that I read earlier, that in the southwest corner's justice, which is related to the pedal, since it is a just man, the just man is one who, firmly planting his feet on the principles of right, is as movable as a rock. If we talk about our journey from being the rough ashlar to being a perfect one, and I think that not only with justice, but with all the virtues, I think if you have these virtues, you're probably a bit further ahead than those who need to learn them. And as you use that common gavel to chip away the parts of your life that are less than positive, and to try to obtain that form of the perfect ashlar, I want you to keep in mind part of that is treating everyone with justice, and as you said, Greg, following the golden rule, doing unto others what you would have them do unto you.
Well, thank you, Darin, and we appreciate everyone that's listened to these last 4 episodes of the 4 Cardinal Virtues. We hope you liked them. They were a little bit shorter format, but we dug down into, I think, a topic that is very fundamental in the Masonic teachings. Again, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. So we hope you've learned to be able to perhaps apply some of those lessons in your daily interactions. If you'd like to hear this episode again or more, visit our website, www.meetactandpart.com. There you'll find links to all of our past episodes. I want to thank Bill Hostler, who wasn't able to join us on this series of 4, but he's doing a tremendous job on our social media. And so Bill sure helps keep our blog and our podcast and all of our other Masonic endeavors in front of people. So Bill, if you're listening, our deepest gratitude towards you. But especially to you, our listeners, again, thank you for being a part of our journey on this podcast. And we hope you are doing well and take care of yourself. And join us again soon for another episode of Meet, Act, and Part.
Thank you for listening to Meet, Act, and Part. For more information about our show, visit our website at www.meetactandpart.com. While there, please consider supporting the show by sponsoring us on Patreon. Until we meet again, may we meet, act, and part.